One spark, one moment of carelessness. In an ancient city, that was all it took to erase a neighborhood or an entire civilization. Imagine a city where every home is built of wood and thatch, where streets are barely wide enough for two people to pass, and where the only light after sunset comes from oil lamps and candles. This was the reality of almost every ancient city, a tinderbox waiting for a spark. The average Roman apartment block, or insula, was 5 or 6 stories high, built of timber and brick, with wooden balconies and staircases. Cooking fires, oil lamps, and braziers were used daily inside these cramped structures. A single overturned lamp could ignite the wooden framework, and flames would leap from floor to floor in minutes. Firefighting in ancient Rome was almost non-existent. The first organized fire brigade, the Vigiles, was established by Emperor Augustus around 6 AD. But they were poorly equipped, buckets, axes, and hooks to pull down buildings. By the time they arrived, a fire had often already consumed entire blocks. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD started in the shops around the Circus Maximus. The lesson was clear. In a world without modern fire codes, a city's density and building materials were its greatest vulnerability. The same conditions repeated across centuries, from London in 1666 to Chicago in 1871. Each time the spark was small, but the tinder was vast. 6 stories tall, built with a wooden frame and brick or concrete walls. But the floors, the stairs, the roof beams, all wood. And every room had a hearth, an oil lamp, or a brazier. Cooking fires were left unattended. Lamps tipped over, braziers spilled embers, and because there was no chimney in most homes, soot built up on the rafters, ready to ignite. And when a fire did start, the urban layout worked against escape. Streets, carts, and market stalls, and the upper floors often leaned so close that neighbors could shake hands across the street. Fire could leap from one building to the next in seconds. The Great Fire of London in 1666 started in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane. A small spark, a wooden house, and within days, 4/5 of the city was. The fire spread so fast because the city was a tinderbox. Houses were packed tight, roofs were thatched, and the wind fanned the flames. People fled with whatever they could carry. Some buried their valuables in gardens, others threw goods into the Thames. But the fire didn't stop until it ran out of fuel. By the time it was over, 13,200 houses, 87 churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral were destroyed. After the Great Fire, London rebuilt with brick and stone. Streets were widened and building regulations changed. But the lesson was slow to spread. Other cities burned too, Chicago in 1871, San Francisco in 1906. Each time the same pattern, wood, wind, and neglect. Fire safety became a science, but only after the ashes had cooled. Market stalls, carts, or debris. In a panic, people trampled each other. Water was scarce. Most cities relied on wells, cisterns, or a single aqueduct. A bucket brigade could take minutes to form, and by then a single house was fully engulfed. And if the wind picked up, the fire became a monster. Embers flew from roof to roof, igniting new fires ahead of the main flame. Entire neighborhoods could be lost in an hour. This was the reality for every ancient city. Fire was a constant threat, and the tools to fight it were primitive. Without organized fire departments, citizens had to rely on themselves and their neighbors. But some cities learned to fight back. They built fire-resistant buildings, stored water in public cisterns, and even created early fire brigades. These innovations saved countless lives and shaped the future of urban cities. Rome was the largest city in the ancient world, with over 1 million people packed into wooden insulae, rickety apartment blocks that rose 6 stories high. Cooking fires, oil lamps, and braziers were everywhere. A single spark could turn a neighborhood into an inferno. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD started in the shops near the Circus Maximus. It raged for 6 days, destroying 10 of the city's 14 districts. Thousands died, and half the population lost their homes. Emperor Nero was blamed, though he was miles away at the time. After the fire, Nero rebuilt Rome with wider streets and fire-resistant stone. He also created the Vigiles, a force of 7,000 men who acted as both firefighters and police. They used buckets, axes, and pumps, and patrolled the streets at night looking for smoke. The Vigiles were stationed in 7 barracks across the city, each with its own water supply and equipment. They could respond quickly, but even they couldn't stop every fire. Rome still burned many times after Nero, But the Vigiles set a precedent that would echo through the city in the ancient world, with over 1 million inhabitants packed into a maze of insulae and narrow alleys. Fires were so common that the Emperor Augustus created the Vigiles, a force of 7,000 men whose sole job was to fight fires. The Vigiles were organized like a military unit. They patrolled at night looking for smoke or unattended fires. They carried buckets, axes, hooks for pulling down burning beams, and even primitive pumps. Their most effective weapon was the fire brake. They would tear down buildings in the path of a fire to create a gap that the flames couldn't cross. This was brutal but effective. The Vigiles also had legal authority to enter any house and inspect for fire hazards. They could punish negligent homeowners. Despite their efforts, the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD still devastated the city. It raged for 6 days, destroying 10 of the 14 districts. Emperor Nero famously blamed the Christians, but many suspected he had started the fire himself. The Great Fire of Rome was a turning point. After it, building codes were tightened. Streets were widened, and new buildings had to be made of fire-resistant stone and brick with lower heights. But the Vigiles remained a permanent fixture. Their legacy influenced firefighting for centuries. In medieval Europe, cities like London and Paris created their own watchmen and fire brigades. The idea of a dedicated, organized fire service was born in Rome. Today, modern fire departments owe a debt to the Vigiles. The concepts of night patrols, fire prevention inspections, and using fire brakes are still standard practice. The next time you see a fire truck racing down the street, remember that its lineage traces back to a Roman emperor and his 7,000-man fire brigade. The Vigiles may have been primitive by our standards, but they were the first to prove that organized firefighting could save lives in cities. Would demolish buildings in the path of the fire using hooks and battering rams, creating a gap the flames couldn't cross. But the Vigiles were not always enough. On the night of July 18, 64 AD, a fire started in the shops near the Circus Maximus. Fanned by a strong wind, it spread rapidly through the wooden structures. The fire raged for 6 days. When it finally burned out, 10 of Rome's 14 districts were destroyed. Thousands died. Hundreds of thousands were left homeless. In the aftermath, rumors spread that Emperor Nero himself had started the fire to clear land for his grand palace, the Domus Aurea. Nero, in turn, blamed the Christians, a small and misunderstood sect. He ordered their arrest and execution in brutal public spectacles. Christians were crucified, burned alive as human torches, and fed to wild animals in the arena. These persecutions marked the beginning of a long and bloody history between Rome and the new faith. Yet the church did not die. It grew stronger in the catacombs beneath the city. Were left homeless. The Emperor Nero was blamed. Some said he started the fire to clear land for his golden house. But most historians today believe the fire was accidental. Nero did, however, use the disaster to rebuild Rome on a grander scale. After the fire, Nero enacted strict building codes. New insulae had to be shorter, with fire-resistant stone walls, wider streets, and private courtyards that acted as fire breaks. He also organized a new firefighting force, the cohorts Vigilum, and stationed them in every district to respond quickly to future fires. Them in every district. But even these reforms couldn't prevent future fires. In 80 AD, another fire broke out under Titus. It destroyed the Capitoline Temple and parts of the Campus Martius. And in 191 AD, a fire during Commodus's reign burned the Temple of Peace and the palace. Rome's fires taught a harsh lesson. No city, no matter how powerful, was immune. The only real defense was prevention, and that meant changing how cities were built. But the lessons of Rome were not always passed on. After the empire fell, many cities returned to wood and thatch. The stage was set for even greater disasters. One of those disasters would strike Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, in the year 532 AD. Constantinople was built on a peninsula, surrounded by water. It had massive stone walls and grand buildings, but its ordinary streets were just as narrow and flammable as Rome's. In January 532 AD, a chariot race at the Hippodrome turned into a riot that would burn the city to the ground. The Nika riots, as they came to be known, began when fans of the Blues and Greens, the two main chariot racing factions, united against the Emperor Justinian. They chanted Nika, meaning conquer, and set fire to the city. The rioters set fire to the hippodrome's wooden seating. The flames spread to the nearby Senate building, then to the Great Palace. Soon, whole neighborhoods were burning. Justinian's general, Belisarius, eventually trapped the rioters in the hippodrome and slaughtered them. But the fire had already consumed half the city. The historian Procopius wrote that the flames seemed to fall from the sky like a rain of fire. The Nika riots left Constantinople in ruins, but they also gave Justinian the opportunity to rebuild the city more magnificently than before. The Nika fire was not an accident. It was arson on a massive scale, used as a political weapon. It showed how fire could be deliberately employed to destabilize a regime. After the fire, Justinian rebuilt Constantinople even more splendidly. The Hagia Sophia, with its massive dome, rose from the ashes. But the rebuilt city still had narrow streets and wooden houses. Across the Mediterranean, other cities faced similar catastrophes. In 847 AD, a fire in Cordoba destroyed much of the city, showing that no metropolis was safe from the flames. The Umayyad capital. In 982 AD, a fire in Cairo burned for 3 days. In China, the Tang dynasty capital Chang'an suffered a devastating fire in 845 AD that destroyed thousands of homes. Chinese cities used watchtowers and bucket brigades, but the density of wooden buildings made fire nearly unstoppable. Medieval European cities were even more vulnerable. London, for example, was a city of wood and thatch. In 1212, a fire started on London Bridge and spread to both ends, trapping people on the bridge. The fire killed an estimated 3,000 people. London's narrow streets and overhanging wooden buildings turned the city into a tinderbox. After the Great Fire of 1212, the city banned thatched roofs and ordered stone construction, but enforcement was slow. It took the Great Fire of 1666 to finally force London to rebuild in brick and stone. That fire destroyed 13,200 houses and 87 churches, but it also created the modern city. Fire, for all its destruction, became a force for change. Hundreds, the death toll may have been over 3,000. London's 1212 fire was one of the worst in medieval history, but it was not the last. In 1666, the Great Fire of London would dwarf all previous disasters. That fire started in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane. It burned for 4 days, destroying 13,200 houses, 87 churches, and St. Paul's Cathedral. Remarkably, only 6 deaths were officially recorded. The Great Fire led to the first modern building regulations in England. Houses had to be built of brick or stone, with thicker walls and wider streets. Insurance companies formed their own fire brigades, but even these reforms were not enough. In 1842, a fire in Hamburg destroyed a third of the city. In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire killed 300 people and left 100,000 homeless. Ancient cities were trapped by their own design. Without organized firefighting, without fire-resistant materials, without wide streets and water supplies, they were at the mercy of a single spark. The Great Fire of London in 1666 started in a bakery on Pudding Lane. It raged for 4 days, destroying over 13,000 houses and 87 churches. Yet remarkably, only 6 deaths were officially recorded. The fire reshaped the city, leading to brick buildings and wider streets. After the fire, London was rebuilt with fire-resistant materials. The new building codes required brick or stone walls and slate roofs. Wider streets acted as fire breaks. The monument to the Great Fire was erected near the source, a permanent reminder of the disaster. The Chicago Fire of 1871 was even more devastating. It killed around 300 people and left 100,000 homeless. The fire destroyed 17,500 buildings across 3 square miles. The city's wooden construction and strong winds created a firestorm that jumped the Chicago River. These disasters sparked the modern fire safety movement. Fire departments became professionalized, building codes were enforced, and insurance companies demanded better protection. The lesson was clear. A city's survival depends on how it prepares.